Welcome to Nurse on Call. This podcast provides emotional support and general education from a registered nurse. It is not medical or mental health treatment and does not replace care from a licensed provider. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency or an immediate danger, please contact emergency services or crisis hotline in your area. Always seek care from a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for individual concerns. Thank you. Take a deep breath with me. If you've been listening along, whether to this episode or this journey as a whole, you've heard the hard parts about chronic illness. The exhaustion, the unpredictability, the grief, and the identity shifts. Today, I don't want to ignore those things, but I do want to gently shift the space we're sitting in, because this episode isn't about tying everything up perfectly. Chronic illness doesn't work like that. There isn't a clean ending. There isn't a moment where everything suddenly makes sense. But there is something else. There is meaning. There is growth. There is a version of you that still exists and still matters within all of this. So today, I want to close this chapter by sharing 3 stories, not perfection, but of perspective. Story 1, Redefining Strength. I once spoke with someone who said, I used to think strength meant pushing through no matter what. Before chronic illness, they were constantly moving, working long hours, saying yes to everything, and showing up without hesitation. Rest felt like weakness. Slowing down felt like falling behind. But chronic illness changed that. There were days their body simply wouldn't cooperate. Days where pushing through made things worse, not better. And at first, that felt like failure. Until one day, they said something that completely shifted how they saw themselves. Maybe strength isn't pushing through. Maybe it's knowing when to stop. That shift didn't happen overnight. It came from trial and error, from burnout, from learning the hard way that their body had limits and that ignoring those limits had consequences. But eventually, they started listening. They began honoring rest, saying no without ever over-explaining, making choices based on what their body needed, not what the world expected. And what they found was this. They weren't weaker. They were wiser. Strength didn't disappear. It evolved. Story 2, Finding Joy in Smaller Spaces. Another person once told me, my life got smaller, but somehow it also got deeper. And that stayed with me, because chronic illness often forces your world to change. Maybe you can't go out as much. Maybe your energy is now limited. Maybe the things that once felt easy now require planning, pacing, or don't feel possible at all. And it can feel like your life is shrinking. But what they shared next was something really powerful. They started noticing things they had overlooked before. Quiet mornings, moments of stillness, small wins like getting through the day with a little less pain or having enough energy to do something they enjoyed. They said joy didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It became quieter, more intentional, and more present. And while it wasn't the life they originally imagined, it was still a life that held meaning, that held moments worth holding on to. Story 3, Rebuilding Identity. This one is for anyone who has ever felt like they don't recognize themselves anymore. Because chronic illness has a way of disrupting identity, It can take the roles you once held, the routines you relied on, and the version of yourself you felt certain about. It can leave you asking, who am I now? I remember someone sharing that they felt like they had lost themselves. Not all at once, but slowly. Until one day, they realized that they had been measuring their worth based on what they could do, how productive they were, how much they could give, and how closely they could hold on to their old life. And when those things changed, their sense of self felt like it disappeared too. Over time, something shifted. They began asking a different question. Not, what can I do? But, who am I regarding what I can do? And that question opened something. They started reconnecting with parts of themselves that weren't tied to productivity. Their values, compassion, their ability to empathize with others, and resilience. Slowly, they began rebuilding an identity that wasn't based on limitations, but on depth. They weren't the same person they were before, but they weren't less. They were different, and different didn't mean broken. What does this all mean? If there's one thing I hope you take from this episode, it's this. Chronic illness may change your life, but it does not erase your worth. You are still here, and that matters more than you realize. Even on the days when you have to cancel plans, you feel disconnected from yourself, you question your strength, you grieve what's been lost. You are still here, and within that, there is still space for growth, connection, meaning, and even moments of peace. Not perfectly, not every day, but enough to matter. So as we close this chapter, I don't want to leave you with pressure. I don't want to say, everything happens for a reason, or try to make this into something neat and resolved, because your experience deserves more honesty than that. Instead, I want to leave you with this. You are allowed to take this one day at a time. You are allowed to honor your limits without shame. You are allowed to create a life that looks different than you expected. And that life can still be meaningful, not because of what you lost, but because of who you are within it. So wherever you are right now, take a breath. You've made it this far, and that in itself is something to hold on to. I'm so glad you are here, and as always, I'm walking this with you. Always be kind to your body and even kinder to your heart. I'll see you next week. Nurse on Call. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you even just a little, I'd love for you to join our community. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling inspired, share it with someone who needs to hear this message too. Your story matters, your voice matters, and together we can create a space where caregivers and people with chronic illness feel seen, supported, and understood. Follow me on Instagram at nurseoncallpod for behind-the-scenes conversations, tips, and encouragement between episodes. Remember, you are not alone, and every time you listen, you are a part of this community. Let's keep walking this journey together.